A message to my queer folk. Do what you love. Someone on TikTok once said,
a good movie keeps you on the edge of your seat. A great movie edges you in your seat.
And I agree, watching Challengers isn't for the weak. 99% of the movie effectively flipped masculine tension on its head, queerifying the performance of it. It's gay, yes, but why? Well, they kiss. I mean, there's only one real gay scene in the movie, and even without it, the tension of masculine desire leads the audience to question every little suggestion because there's subtext. You ever thought about how much times you performed for a man? You ever thought about performing for a man? It goes like this, okay? Every one of you listening and watching will now experience boyhood. Yeah. You're in 3rd grade with a ranking system of internalized percentiles equating to how fast can we run? In that instance, your self-worth is determined by your standing with the men around you. You're performing for a man. You're in 6th grade. All your friends are talking about who they've kissed. If they haven't, people congratulate you based on a set of expectations relating to women. It's related to women, but even still, your self-worth is determined by your standing with the men around you, in tandem with an expectation you sewed into your head, like some kind of isekai shonen protagonist. You're only doing this for masculine approval. You're performing for a man. You're in grade 12, all your friends are getting their licenses, cars, jobs, and applying to their dream universities, colleges, trades, etc. Life is a bit more complex now. You thank your coach at graduation for instilling values of dedication and hard work for you. You performed for a man. You dap up the homies who've been there since day one. You're happy they're here. Masculinity kept you all together. You apply/get a job. Kinda lucky, actually. And your boss asks you if you've been on teams/value competitions/gives you a strict dress code/tells you that you'll get a raise if you work for it. You're performing for a man. Challengers is effectively saying the way vibes are fathomed is a phenomenon of masculine peer-to-peer performance. They're holding up a mirror in lowercase. The point is, you've been doing the same things the Challengers guys have. You're no less gay than these two twinks on the tennis court. You just do the gay differently. You've been doing this your whole life, and I'm about to make you aware of it. This is Tirrrrb, by the way. If you're new, hi. This video is going to be split into 2 long acts because I'm a lifelong yapper. Born yapper at Yapmaster University, residing in the district of Yap. Act 1 will encompass a brief explanation of masculine performance and how it correlates with men. Act 2 will cover how the Challengers movie pieces it together. And if you like my video, I have a Patreon. It starts at $3 a month. Help pay rent, help a real yapper get it yipping on the internet. What would Zendaya do? Ask yourself and proceed accordingly. Link in bio, link in face, LinkedIn Tirrrrb. Okay, so gay tennis. Act 1, a delicate dance. A daunting dance, a spiritual journey. Tennis, it's deeper than smacking balls. The Challenger stresses an inherent tension of masked desire, rooted in a theory known as hegemonic masculinity. And if you've been here for a bit, bear with me. To understand how the performance of masculinity these 2 tennis players go through translates into a critique of masculine desire, we have to dive into how hegemonic masculinity can be applicable to this plot. The plot beginning, oddly enough, in Australia. Yes, Australia. In a related conceptual discussion of the making of masculinity and the experience of men's bodies, and in a debate over the role of men in Australian labor politics. This white girl basically laid out in a high school project providing empirical evidence of gendered hierarchy. Later on after that, explaining the theory with the helps of James W. It's German, I don't really care to pronounce it correctly. Like weird last name, but at least it had some seasoning. Why have last names devolved into Richard and Collins? Make white last names great again. A vote for Tirrrrb is a vote. And obviously this list of feminist contribution wouldn't be complete without considering the work of my sunshine, my only sunshine bell hooks, and a number of other amazing minds. Now how does this relate to tennis? Boom balls. Balls. Men. Balls are out, men. The balls are out, men. Men who receive the benefits of patriarchy without enacting a strong version of masculine dominance could be regarded as showing a complicit masculinity. It was in relation to this group and to compliance among heterosexual women that the concept of hegemony was most powerful. Hegemony did not mean violence, although it could be supported by force. It meant ascendancy achieved through culture, institutions, and persuasion. America is kind of like an institution legally. I mean, legally it goes to court as a corporation, so we can refer to it as such, right? Order in the court, Mr. President. What do you have to say about genocide. A lot of what we do generally is supported for forces of structures so deeply ingrained in social interaction. Men have gained the audacity to pick up a mic and become millionaires off of other men. So drilled into the Orpheuses of modern day sentience, you could find it in the interactions of a child on the internet. It's a formidable foe that sets the rules for social dynamics in the modern day. And it starts with the perception of man subjectively shifting in regionality. But in the West, we can use this to explain why do men? This isn't a diss to men though, but to really get into why this hegemonic masculinity can explain the gay, it's important to point out the impacts of social adherence and its relations to personal competition. And yes, hegemonies are ever evolving according to time, race, regionality, and even American Constitution. A mogger of the modern day would fall forgotten to the wig warriors of yesterday. As highlighted in the review, young adolescences endorse masculinity norms related to physical toughness, example, showing higher tolerances for pain, engaging in fights, competition in sports, example, being financially independent, protecting and providing for families, emotional stoicism, example, not acting like girls or showing vulnerabilities, dealing with problems on one's own, and heterosexual prowesses, example, having sex with many girls, exercising control over girls in relationships. Gender, in our Western connotation, is the way perceptions of sex are legitimized through the binary. There's a lot of these guys, I'm not expecting y'all to know all of them, it's infinitely nuanced, ever adapting, whatever, just know that it's there. And yes, 2008 Leafy viewer, attack helicopter is on the menu, Optimus Prime is trans. Change my mind. You can't. The experience of gender is infinitely nuanced. This is mine. Try to tell me I'm not. It won't work. That's me. But at a societal level, the internalization of a subjective gender is watered down to one of the two, man or woman. Differing forms of masculine/feminine identity and action won't correlate to the same responses depending on where you are in the world. I mean, it wasn't until 2016 that the black dreadhead was allowed in snow bunny homes everywhere. You actually learn in university bio that this is a flawed perception of human anatomy, but who am I to argue with Scholastic Book Fair's #1 Greg Heffley fan? Am I right? Diary of a Wimpy Kid's discography is a substitute for a bachelor's degree. We all knew this. You're probably more right than decades of research with millions of dollars of funding that has preceded our existence. The first indicators of social adherence felt in tandem with hegemonic masculinity, I'd argue, goes deeper than when you're first born. There are historical social factors of class, privilege, and regionality which determine what man or woman is. You live in the context of lore. Lore surrounds you. Read about it. But for the case of this video, we're going to be starting at adolescence. Calm down, Drake. The review further indicates that adolescent boys are more likely to endorse unequal gender norms than girls. There are three potential explanations for this. First, in many settings, norms that privilege men are seen as quote-unquote normal, and hence boys may not perceive the need to challenge them. Second, with the onset of puberty, boys experience greater relative freedom and power compared with girls, and therefore may be less motivated to challenge the privileges conferred to them by society. And lastly, where and when boys may be willing to adopt more equitable attitudes, or if they display feminine traits, i.e. in appearance,
or engage in activities, example, help with household chores, associated with girls, they face more social barriers, including ridicule and labeling from peers and stigmatization from society as compared with girls.
Some would say it all started with your parents. All my immigrant homies know the familiar kiss of objects twice your size, enforcing family dynamics of straight A's. And white boys, remember when your parents took away your Xbox because you were like underage drinking at a party? Like, times that by like 1,000,000. But that's besides the point. Ask not what you could do for gender, but what gender could do for you. Vote for Tirrrrb 2024. I'll legitimize furries. We can all be Shadow the Hedgehog. There's a delicate dance of complacency felt in a familial setting you don't get to opt out of until much later on. Some say 18, but in this economy, I don't question why some people are 30 years old, still sat at the nest. Get it how you live. I was kicked out at 18 and became a YouTuber. Social dynamics relating to gendered familial roles can take the image of girls given makeup instead of Beyblades. Think of all the young women who haven't had the experience of Bakugan brawling. It's a generational tragedy. Or it can take the image of little boys given a hockey stick instead of Bratz dolls.
Then Jillian will call the police and Yasmin will go to jail. And she only eats organic and I don't know if they have organic in jail.
Sports can actually be a monumental case study as to how masculinization is promoted societally in the West. You might not know this, but prior to the 1970s, women were not allowed to ball. Balling epidemic. The Constitution prohibited their right to ball. What do you think about that, Hamilton?
Pride is not the
But all this changed in 1972 when Title IX was passed in schools, a law that prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex. Granted, this was still under the binary, so it was originally developed in response to discrimination in higher education, such as enrollment quotas or refusing to hire femme academics with children. But the law became best well known for its effect on sports. Prior to the 1970s, most schools only had teams for boys, and as a result, only 4% of women played sports. The Title IX bill effectively introduced equal funding for both girls and boys sports. And how that worked out so unfavorably will be endowed upon in a future clause. I mean, look at this.
Showing this. This is the weight room that the women competing at the NCAA tournament get. One rack of weights. I think they go up to 30 pounds here. Now take a look at this. This is what the men get to work with. An entire room of weights, bars, plates.
This too. It seems social complacency has kept its vice grips on the balls relating to men and fame and funding and all that good stuff. However, this law increased the number of girls playing high school sports from almost 300K in 1970 to a high of almost 3.5 million in the 2017 to 2018 school year. In 2021 to 2022, 3.2 million girls played high school sports. Girls now make up almost 43% of high school athletes. In the ethos of masculinity, this reaffirms social tendencies of adherence being supported by structure. This sort of adherence to social normativity can be seen with men being encouraged to pursue pathways like sports, more so than their femme comrades. I mean, even before then, black masks were treated as too good scientifically to play sports with white men. There's actually a real racist optic you have to keep in check when you're pretending that black people can't ball. Cause like, you'd be lying. Let's be realistic. Do I have to show you statistics or a LeBron James mixtape?
My sunshine, my only sunshine, you make me happy.
I choose the LeBron James mixtape. This social complacency didn't end until the late 1940s when African Americans were beginning to play in the major professional sports. And by the 1950s, all major professional sports had been desegregated. This is important to note because hegemonic masculinity relies on the restricted power of relations and women in order for it to truly do its dirty work. Its dirty relations and explaining the tension between these two men. Just wait. We're getting into tennis soon. Have you ever heard of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese though? Because these two stories surround how projections of race and femininity and also cis identity work on a more national scale. But first, let me outline the rules of basketball. There are 12 or more players on each team, a coach, an assistant coach, maybe some towel boys and additional coaches. But overall, everyone's looking to score more points than the other team before the clock runs out. So why in a team with a black coach and several black players were Larry Bird's Boston Celtics seen as the white team? While Magic Johnson's team had Pat Riley and some key white players, why was Los Angeles seen as a black team? Because Larry Bird, from a media standpoint, was seen as the Great White Hope. He actually didn't like this title as much as the media did, but he still co-signed it in his remarks, so we'll get into that in a little bit. The Great White Hope comes from the early 1900s, when a black boxer named Jack Johnson dominated the sport. Fans were so resentful of his success inside the ring, they searched for a white boxer, a Great White Hope, to defeat him. Coincidentally, men's NCAA had two big stars in this era of racist programming not that long ago, the 1970s. Your parents were alive and breathing through this, friend. One from Michigan and one from Indiana. Magic won in the finals. Magic won. But anyways, let's start with Larry Bird. The average white middle-class basketball fan fueling the NBA with their money rooted for him because they felt he was a pure blue-collar farm kid who worked extremely hard and earned everything he's gotten. An ideal form of the 1970s grit and work culture was embodied in this figure named Larry Bird, a perfect projection of white masculinity at the time. Parallel to Magic, who supposedly didn't have to work as hard because he was just given talents. The talent of being black, athletic, and born to play basketball. You can see how that's racist, right? I don't really gotta explain that, right? These tensions only worsened after college when they both got drafted to two different teams. Magic the Lakers and Bird with the Celtics. This rivalry also saved the NBA, who was in a financial crisis, selling the storyline from a media standpoint as the Great White Hope. However, back in Boston, the white team, segregation in classrooms literally just ended, with the judicial ramifications of ending segregation leading leading to a white flight. This is a social reality defined as, well, black people are here, we must leave the game for white people. The snow sardines set up suburbs away from the city and financed their own schools. Well, black people in inner city Boston at the time had to choose between moving to predominantly white suburbs to give their children a better education or remaining in the city with black community, exposed to an inferior school system and increasing crime. In an ESPN article, Howard Bryan writes, anyone who could leave that neighborhood left. You were going to be the only black kids in class, but you were going to have to deal with that, my mother once told me. I wasn't about to let my kids be taught an education that was worse than the one I got in the same city 25 years earlier. We didn't move for me. We moved for you. Now, as far as basketball was concerned, the Celtics were the white fans' team. And even though there were obviously a lot of black people in Boston, Larry Bird, being the great white hope, signified white pride in the same way Donald Trump's Make America Great Again went triple platinum with white people in 2016 and had no motion in the black community. Such a bar! I mean, Magic Johnson was even told that black Boston fans cheered for the Lakers instead of Boston. Bird would even say constantly throughout his career, I just wanted to prove that a white boy who couldn't run and couldn't jump could play the game. A saying that would later go on to produce films that mimicked racial relations between the black and white basketball players. Jack Harlow, the irony of you being a white industry plant, profiting off of a culture you weren't meant for, is not lost on us. We saw you with that white boy can't jump rendition. It's right. Come on. Come on. But because Magic Johnson wasn't a cis hetero white man, his inflictions to the binary enacted national racialized bias revolving around him being a black man. The whole time, however, from an outside point of view, from a pure NBA fan's point of view, these two men were just competing to be the best at the sport they were playing, right? Granted, the same barriers of race relations don't exist in the same way they did then in the modern day. One could view this act of performing for another man under the telescope of society and through barriers of corporate profit. You could say all that, but at the end of the day, the audience was watching this intense performance between these two men, tuned, rather erotic. Hey, I mean, hegemonic masculinity is defined by a group acceptance of masculine identities surrounding subjective, superficial reasons, much like a sports game. I'm the point guard, so I play point. I pass. I facilitate for my teammates. I'm the two, so I shoot here. I'm the post. I grab rebounds. Everyone's subscribing to something, but the tension of masculinity remains. If this basketball or this tennis ball rules my perception of self, and the aspect of dominating this man on the court brings me fame, a job, happiness, isn't my power fantasy of delight based on how well I dominate this man? In a cis hetero sense. No, in a cis hetero sense. Cis hetero. It was cis hetero. When you look at it this way, the Challengers isn't inherently any more gay than what we feel like it's conveying a very real practice, just emphasizing it a little. It stresses the masculine tension of dominance the act of being a man brings forth. In the case of the femmes, present Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, chat. I love both of these people, and you won't force me to pick a side. I won't 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 pick a side. Come on! It's the Bayou Barbie. Just like the viewers of the past, Tirrrrb is persuaded by communal aura. Femme version. The new Larry Bird and Magic Johnson to the media. We need to delve into how a perception of binary sex in tandem with race plays into hegemony. Racism has evolved throughout the years. You can't exactly signal white pride without it being called into question, right? Right?
It's the storming of the Capitol. Trump supporters forcing their way into the halls of Congress.
In the age of social media, players are just as marketable as their sport. This has translated into players being constantly watched, bombarded, and scrutinized in such a public sense, we could turn our phones on and be updated on what they ate, see the discourse on if the food was good enough, find two baby daddies arguing about whether or not they're a good wife to have based on the shape of their elbows. You know the drill. You can't hide from the public when you're famous anymore. And this has differing ramifications for women, but rest assured, Taylor Swift, I've seen the jet statistics. You will be taken care of. Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, like Magic and Bird, started this rivalry of theirs in an NCAA tournament, one that broke records for these two women's nearly 3-second interaction. Caitlin Clark was the #1 player in the country, averaging a near triple-double, pulling up from, I don't know how fucking far that is, look at that. Point is, she was unstoppable, taking this Iowa team no one knew about and beating the NCAA's South Carolina, a team that won 42 games in a row. And on the other side, Angel Reese was playing with the super team, arguably being the best power forward in the league and dominating the charts in her own way. Still fucking impressive. LCU was trying to snatch its first ever national championship. Their team composed of Flau J and knockdown shooters, nothing to really scoff at. However, at the end of the day, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, these two baddies were pitted against each other because of public perceptions surrounding sportsmanship in the NBA. The story goes like this. LCU and Iowa met in the semis, fresh off of Caitlin Clark's 41-point victory over South Carolina. But during the course of LSU versus Iowa, LSU dominated the whole game, being up by 10 points at multiple intervals in this match. Caitlin Clark usually hits a John Cena, you can't see me, you know, taunts, like as all sports players do. Taunting a bit shows some animosity. And I mean, like, late in the game, you gonna get what you give, right? Angel Reese did it right back. The internet erupted, calling Angel Reese unsportsmanlike, unclassy, a lot of racism. Well, Caitlin Clark even said,
I don't think Angel should be criticized at all. No matter which way it goes, she should never be criticized for what she did. I'm just one that competes and she competed. So I think everybody knew there was going to be a little trash talk in the entire tournament.
However, the media will paint how it does. Showing ferocity is a gendered nuance of discrimination, which went against Angel Reese's position of being born a woman, a black woman. I mean, come on. What happened to the old heads talking about how rough the NBA used to be? You can't even hit the white boy animation anymore for what? You can't even do this? This isn't even an account for the horrible treatment Angel Reese has felt from her team compared to Caitlin Clark. But there's another argument that can be made here. Some are saying because Caitlin Clark is straight, a woman, and white, and because the WNBA has been populated by black queer femmes for the longest amount of time, Caitlin Clark may be the perfect marketing tool. Because in the performance of hegemonic masculinity, you still have to subscribe to heterosexuality. Because if it's gay, it just doesn't work, right? If it's gay, a man backing down another man in the paint in basketball, it just doesn't work, right? The point being, competition is limited to a masculine experience. I mean, the WNBA doesn't get the same funding as the NBA does, although it's better nowadays. Boys are still pandered to in schools. The aspect of sports is still confined in a binary, which socially translates into protection more often than not for cis white women. Not saying Caitlin Clark hasn't gotten any hate, because through this, I've seen people in the comments use her femininity in order to devalue her accolades. Caitlin, you're a shooter, but would it kill you to say, take it easy on Angel Reese, please? Please stop bullying Angel Reese. Please use that white privilege to your advantage.
With the life that I have now, as a white woman who leads a black-led sport and celebrated here, I want to show a light on black women. They don't get the media coverage that they deserve. They've given so much to this sport and the community and society as a whole, and their value is undeniable. And in the WNBA, last season, the postseason awards, 80% of the winners were black, but they got half of the coverage as the white athletes. So I think it's time for change. Sports media holds the key to storylines. Sports media and sponsors tell us who is valuable, and you have told the world that I matter today, and everyone who voted, thank you. But I think we should use this power together to also celebrate black women. So to Maria Taylor, Robin Roberts, Maya Moore, Odyssey Alexander, to all the incredible black women in my life, on my teams, to Breonna Taylor and all the lives lost, and to those names who have not yet learned, but I hope to share, I stand behind you and I'll continue to follow you and follow your lead and fight for you guys. So I just want to say thank you for everything.
Both scenarios came in conjecture with the societal truth of conformity, for black detriment, for white detriment, for women's detriment, for men's benefit. You see, it's intricate that way. The point being, white cis hetero men please the power system of hegemony in a specific way that isn't restricted by race and gender. And I'm not saying you, Jameses and Charleses, haven't suffered, okay? There are aspects based on class/familial dynamics, etc., that subjectively change the lives of people. But the challengers posed the question, what if social subjection just had the power to edge you in your seat in the middle of a movie theater and literally make you come off the performance of two men competing? Act 2. Gay tennis is a metaphor for gay, like, philosophical sex that men do for each other in the pursuit of masculinity. The movie even. Sweat drips, emotions, Riz, Zendaya fucking a white man. All this balanced as all things should be. Immediately, we get a snippet of what this movie has in store for us. A rivalry and someone trying to shake it up. I guess KC's really undercover, right? I'll be here next time. In a heated tennis game, composed of our two white twinks, a battle is brewing. It seems no one can give an inch, and the look in this woman's eyes tells us everything we need to know about their motivations. I mean, she's literally set in between them, watching coldly as these men give it everything they got. The Challengers, in my viewing, accurately depicts, in this moment, our protagonists' relationships to hegemony. What drives these men to win initially isn't Zendaya. In fact, she only reaffirms the inherent performance of masculinity by providing these two tennis players a reward for winning. The audience should ask, however, what's fueled these men's experiences relating to the game of tennis? And they'll find that it's each other. For Patrick to win, he needs Tashi, Zendaya's character, to reaffirm his internalized notions of masculinity, which tell him he's better than Art. And for Art to win and keep his American dream of family life alive, he needs Zendaya too. Both of them, however, just have to dominate the man in front of them to be better than them. To win, this phenomenon of hegemonic adherence brings about an unclear line where the aspect of winning is involved. Just like the Larry Bird / Magic Johnson synopsis set up earlier, through the racial barriers of media / social scrutiny, at the end of the day, these two men just have to beat each other in order to go down in history as the greatest of their generation. Granted, no one involved in this was black. I just kind of picked Magic Johnson because I was like, oh, Black Mask, I kind of want to do that. The fame and fortune between these men competing, however, come packaged with who can take it further. For men, a growing body of research now indicates connections between aspects of societal expectations for male-identified individuals and poor mental health. In this literature, gender is understood as being sociologically constructed. That is, men act in the way they do, not because of biological traits, but because of the concepts of masculinity that are adopted from their culture. Specifically, within a framework of social construction, masculinities are not viewed as the biological essence of an individual, but rather as a set of practices put into action by individuals interacting with others in their environment. In other words, there is no way of being a man, but rather multiple ways, depending on an individual's given context. Socially, we group ourselves into gendered categories, then set up repercussions for those who can't fit molds of what the category embodies. And in this way, the self-worth and mental health of men are commonly supported by the actions, reactions, and communication methods of peer-to-peer interactions within men's social settings. In an office setting, this might be like switching your voice on the phone to the customer service one for better reviews. In like a school setting, this could like translate to like living up to the standard of an older sibling who was maybe very good at a sport or a subject. In 2010's Rice Gum era YouTube, it's like when they went supercar for supercar with a domestic terrorist. Point being, this aspect of competition inherent in the performance of masculinity is emphasized right away. As evident in this scene, I mean, there's nothing inherently queer about this scene. Nothing gay is happening, just a man stretching out his body. But the way in which these men are performing this act of preparing him for his match, making sure his body is in good condition, embracing a stoicism interlinked with heterosexuality, while still looking each other deep in the eyes. I mean, what they're doing is for him, right? It's in service of him, right? The undertone shown in this movie is created through the tension of masculine performance. White boy number 1, Art, the one that looks like Niall Horan's Manchester Universe 39 body double, stay with me, has no motivation to do this for himself. Very early on, we can see how Zendaya fuels him to take tennis seriously, how he tries to capture moments of happiness, not in tennis, but with his child, compared to Zendaya's first hint of emotion being shown when she reaffirms him by saying,
"Decimate that little bitch."
Zendaya's character, Tashi, proposes a thought experiment. What if the reality given through masculine desire also desired masculinity? The love interest is growing tired of Niall Horan. That sounded like a line from Wattpad. Even though Niall Horan, being Art, has the money, fame, and child he desires, there's still a racially ambiguous sized chasm. A tale as old as time. Now, all of our current protagonists' greatest joys have come in tandem with dominating in the sports world. So what would happen if the things attributed to their performance drifted away? the worse they got. I mean, they're the things propelling these three forward, right? Tashi's character literally walks Art into the match after giving him like the biggest sassy talk ever, even walking ahead of him, propelling him forward. Zendaya leading Art into a match is a metaphor for their relationship, and he loses. Damn, him losing the match is a concern for Tashi, because now she's drifting away further from her dream of being with the best tennis player. We're going to be dissecting this dynamic of hegemonic normativity through these three individual relationships, starting with Art and Patrick. Nothing really weird about them initially, they're just two tennis players with some questionable celebrations, but I've seen some weirder ones. You know, you beat the guy, so you gotta celebrate, I get it. It's important to note that these men celebrating on the field isn't inherently sexual. Hegemonic masculinity works with the idea of straight normalcy among men. Heterosexuality is the norm in the performative experience when you opt into living initially. But what if there was a liminal space where men were allowed to touch other men without stigma? See where I'm getting at? Tennis is essentially a domain expansion inside hegemonic masculinity with a sure hit of eroticism. Being a non-binary mask is essentially assuming the role of Sukuna in the Shibuya arc. The joy of the tennis they're playing currently is in its accolades through camaraderie. Doubles tennis allowed Art and Patrick to form an inseparable bond in the same way sports facilitate relationships for a lot of young men too. Patrick even showed Art how to jerk off. And as a kid who wasn't allowed to attend health class, my homies had to literally educate me on what porn was in grade 10. And I know y'all be having porn group chats and sharing your favorite porn stars. Don't act like this isn't a cis-normative experience in mask relationships. But because of the boys will be boys mentality, we tend to brush these things under the rug. I better not hear y'all complaining about women making out with their best friends when you flash and grip on each other in the men's locker rooms though. Anyway! Art and Patrick are a duo. Fresh off of a win at the US Open, they're a solid pair, one could say. Solid couple. And for those who don't know, like me, the International Tennis Federation says the Grand Slam tournaments, Australian Open, Roland Garros, how the fuck you say? Roland Garros, Wimbledon, and US Open are the most prestigious individual competitions in tennis. And when they win, a member in the audience screams, "Fire and ice." Not a Cool Math Games reference. But one to Murray and Suraz, a tennis duo that has taken over the Open many times before. This is such a white video, by the way. I can literally feel my Caucasian cortex expanding by the second. So at this point, the glass ceiling of talent hasn't been shown to our boys in the doubles department, meaning they've experienced the joy of reaping the rewards of hegemonic masculinity together without a clear challenger. Notice, however, how Patrick gets the game-winning shot. It's also important to note how the most grounding events of the movie takes place in flashbacks during these two men's tennis games 13 years later. This movie uses tennis as a metaphor for life, with the current match 13 years in the future being the period on a lot of tea that we gotta clap. These flashback scenes being woven in between the tennis match is a metaphor for the many small battles of hegemony that go towards winning the war. These two men know they're standing on the court via their standing in life. Art admits very early on he's not as talented as Patrick, even asking him to not demolish him and to let him win a set.
A favor? Mm-hmm. Can you not demolish me tomorrow? Shut the fuck up. Listen, I'm at peace with the fact that you're going to win. It's not a fact. I'm just saying, throw me a couple of games, maybe a set.
And to Art's confusion, Patrick agrees.
If it matters to you so much, I can just give it to you. Really? Yeah.
To put this situation into context, they just won the doubles trophy at a prestigious Open, and Patrick carried them through the tournament. Why would Patrick not want more? Patrick, however, states that was different. That was just you and me. Patrick's dog, the one in here, that Care Bear thing in here that rules our urge to ball, the internal call to masculinity, is not the same as Art's. Art has a Chihuahua. This nigga got a Rottweiler. While Art's ideations of life are fixated on the family unit and the joy of stability, Patrick initially just wants personal satisfaction in the conquest of women, money, and sports. I mean, they're tennis players, they already have money. So really, all that's left for Patrick is to sport max. And since his personal success is reliant on his doubles partner, he doesn't care about the outcome. His dog is fed by friendship right now. That's cute. However, remember, concepts of hegemony are still appealing to him, and one girl is firm on his mind. Cue the pretty light-skinned face of Hollywood! Please take a joke, Zendaya. You were walking the carpet wearing garments fashioned by Sinisa Crane while the Hunger Games was going on the other side of the world. I'm sure you could handle a couple little jokes. Women can make us do dumb things, right, men? Or is that just me? Upon seeing Tashi Duncan, Art literally forgets he has a final tomorrow and joins Patrick at the Adidas event they were invited to. Now immediately we know the boys' motivations for Tashi Duncan are yes, fueled because she's a really, really, really good professional tennis player. But there are other really good tennis players out there. Why fixate on Tashi? She's hot as fuck. She's very appealing to these two men. The movie very clearly emphasizes that as the reason too. She's the woman throughout the movie. And due to her role as a prize in the competition between these two men, both literally and metaphorically, it's like no other woman really exists. After an initial meeting between Art, Patrick, and Tashi, they meet again at the beach and have a conversation about motivations revolving around tennis. And throughout this conversation, tennis is synonymously used in place for life.
And when are you going pro?
As soon as I can. Hitting a ball with a racket is a great way to avoid having a job.
Well, that's also your problem. Because you think that tennis is about expressing yourself, doing your thing. That's why you still have that serve.
It works.
Zendaya's character, Tashi, has a different life under the mask hegemony of life. She has to stay in school. She has to be at the Adidas meeting. She doesn't smoke. She thinks of more than just herself because she can't afford to slip up. While Peter has no real competitive aspirations, backed up by the fact he told Art most people that win the US opener rank top 300 and go on to be world renowned, yet still gave that up, smoking, convincing Art to skip class, etc. In reality, life, just like tennis, is a relationship that needs to be maintained. Between Art and Patrick, a very real bond solidified in the experiences of tennis success. However, this is a hegemonic relationship, so something's missing. A little girly, a little girly girl. Zendaya is an appealing prospect, but this relationship between Patrick and Art can't be continued when they both have Zendaya. Polyamorous relationships? Let's be honest, men. You don't even let your girl hang out with other men. Art and Peter can't win together anymore. They're now competing in individual matches in the game of life, not doubles. Metaphorically written by the movie, I caught that, Luca. I caught that, Lua Guarin. I don't know how to say that last name, but I caught that, Luca. I'm familiar with your game. This doubles to singles metaphor critiques the way a lot of relationships with men need a co-balance based on patriarchal standards, leading to Patrick, just like a lot of other men, trying to outman Art. The age-old grade 7 peacock dance, currently known as Riz, showing out for the hoes, in quotations, showing out for the hoes, whoever your hoes may be. Happy Pride Month! Tashi, however, comes with a price. After their beachside conversation, they meet up back at Art and Patrick's hotel they were staying in for the doubles tournament. Zendaya seduces them both and then forces them to make out with each other while staring ominously. Something tells me from this photo, she knows what she's doing. But before this all took place, the jerking off scenario thing that I told you about before? No, you see, because it's straight. It's straight because there's a girl in the scene. I promise. Come on, it's Tashi. Tennis star by day, Shake It Up Chicago star by night. There's even a rumor that she's dating the Spider-Man. She's on a generational milkman run. During this masturbation scene, Peter reminisces on how he had to teach Art the boy wizard spell, Expelliarmus Extremitus, clearly as a way to prop himself above Art in Tashi's eyes. And I'm being real, like, when Tashi asks Patrick and Art,
And who finished first?
Oh, I don't remember.
I think you.
that nigga came.
Yeah.
He came.
Yeah.
It was literally like an avalanche, like volcano, like so much coming down, like a snowstorm. It was like that. Like, if you can imagine that, it was like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was so unbecoming of you. Know, I was trying really hard to edge. Like, as a man, like what? Like, why first?
I'm not the best edger.
Why first? Come on, why are you telling her this story? Hi, Noah.
Good.
How are you today?
Good. Hi, Tirrrrb. I'm good. How are you? I'm looking right in the camera. I'm not looking at my own picture to check my appearance. Since I'm sunburnt, I'll stop looking. I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming again. We pulled you in a rather different context, I would say, because I want to take a time to talk about the demerits and experience of performing masculinity. So before we start, what is your relationship to gender?
My relationship to gender, I guess, has changed over time. I think growing up, I had a more traditional relationship to masculinity in the sense that I was really involved in sports. And so I think that kind of shoehorns you into a social context of like, I guess, performance and competition and ego for ego's sake, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when it comes to sports, but it does shape how you kind of view yourself and view the world. And that's changed over time, though. I think coming out of that phase of my life and kind of being like, I guess, getting in tune with the arts and then that transitioning into a political understanding and learning about, you know, sociology and systems and things kind of shifts your perspective quite a bit. And then that left me a little like, okay, what happens from here? But then I guess the relationship over time with masculinity has become less of a relationship and more of from an observational standpoint about myself and a reflective standpoint and an observational standpoint of other people's, I guess, performances of gender.
No, I really get that, because when you're in the bubble, you're like forced to perform, you know, under conformity. And there's a lot of things that like reaffirm masculinity when you're really, I think like my funniest story relating to like the beginning of the performance of masculinity started out like, okay, this is my first school. I was in like a 5-6 split class, which means like I got to be in a class with my older cousin, and me and them, like, we did like what boys always do. Like, we always compare each other to each other, like specifically like, oh, look at my muscles, da 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 da. But like one time specifically, we wrote our names on a sheet beside each other with a check mark, yes or no, in order to find out who's the most attractive in the class, right?
Yeah.
And we handed them out to like all the women, and I lost, you know. Even though I can laugh about it now, moments like that like reaffirm hegemony inherently present in the West, you know. Do you have any like first memories of performing masculinity?
Let me think. That's a great story, because that's just some classic shit.
Like challengers, but the whole class.
Yeah, God, that's physical evidence of the truth. I think it was a similar relationship with like girls and dating, I guess, that attractiveness and the connection and relationship from you to other people is strictly value-based and strictly, I guess, I mean, in your case, like numbers-based, like the number of votes you got when you lose. It doesn't matter how many of the people found you attractive, which is like, I don't know, it's a nice thing on its own. Because your number was lower than the other person, you're like less of a human being, which is wild. Because I don't know, I mean, even if you got 0, but I'm assuming you at least got 1, like, I think you're a good looking dude. No, if you didn't, that's okay. But I'm like, it wouldn't matter if you didn't, but also that's all external stuff that really at the end of the day, the comparison aspect doesn't help you or anyone else. It only makes you, I mean, I'm sure that didn't feel great, like you're saying that was like a landmark thing. It doesn't feel good when you lose the boy competition. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to think. In my case, I've just never lost.
No, some people are like that though. Some people have a really reaffirmed connection in hegemony because they've reaped the rewards, so much of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm a loser of the gender wars because I've opted out and I'm a non-binary androgynous with calamity thing. However, like my experience with like performing masculinity was never like unaffirming most of the time at a social level. Like I could play basketball, I got good grades, I was tall, I was decent looking. That's like all you really need to coast through life as a dude in high school, you know? To speak about it from your experience, what's it like in that pursuit of masculinity?
I guess, yeah, for me, it's changed so much because in that hyper competitive environment, I wouldn't say I was well suited to it necessarily, but it was from the jump something that I kind of, I guess, was able to, what's the word? Like not infiltrate, but like not a fly on the wall even, because I was in the room, not the fly. What am I trying to say here? integrated, I guess. Integrating into that system from so early on made it so that it all felt like I was wired, basically, not biologically, but by, the constructs of everything else. I mean, maybe at one point I would have explained it as, I wasn't even in politics like that at the time. That I would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it was just something I didn't think about. And then eventually that changes, and eventually you start exploring other performances, and you see like being on the internet and displaying in some way that's slightly more feminine than anything. The immediate backlash from any sort of masculine space or men on the internet is very prevalent and obvious. And the strongest experience with the aftermath of, or like the negative effects of a system like that for me came when I left the system, basically. And I mean, that was on the internet, so granted, people will say a lot more shit that they wouldn't say to you in real life. People just don't act like people, on there, but it's still reflective of the same attitudes they hold.
Have you watched the Challengers?
Yes.
Okay, you know how in the Challengers movie, Art and Peter, like the two white boys fighting over like Tashi, they end up trying to one up each other in order to like gain her affection. That trend that's like on Instagram, that's like, that time that guy said this, he liked this, so I did this. Well, when I was younger, my crush, who was only giving my friend attention, told me she only speaks Tagalog. And I watched a lot of rom-coms. I was under the impression that I was better suited for this woman. So I Google translated a love poem that I wrote, and I sent it to her. And it had obscenities of my friends in it. And I'm still left on red to this day.
Oh God.
So like, if that ever leaks, I'm sorry. But back and forths like that are present in a lot of people raised as men in conflation to competition. Do you have a toxic story of like masculine confliction, and how has that changed your perspective?
Yeah, I think this is like a deep cut, I guess, but in high school there's a time period where there was like, I don't know, you probably are familiar with this sort of hierarchy of like attractive people at a school, like, oh, the hottest girl, or the dude that everybody likes. And then it goes down in some like numbered list that either you have in your mind or that they write out on like a locker room or a piece of paper.
Yeah, literally locker rooms. Oh my God. Yeah.
Bathroom stall doors and stuff. But there was this one point where this one girl who was just like a very like, in this context, in this like competitive context, the most sought after person, or one of them. And she was dating someone that I knew that was like a friend of mine. And when they broke up, there was an opportunity for me to like pursue this person. And the my sort of bond with my friend was overtaken by the idea that I could pursue and achieve this thing that to me was like, I don't know, that to me, like, obviously you're a young person, it's an attractive person. Like if you have an opportunity to date or like hook up with someone in that context, it's not necessarily on its own a bad thing, but like I think the underlying reason there was very much more about something much different. It's like you pick anyone else and try to like slide in their DMs or whatever, but you pick this person and you could kind of like in hindsight understand why. But that drive to receive that sort of social reward overtook any sort of the value that I had of my friendship with this person, which is like, and then I ended up like doing that, and then that like fractured me and my friend's relationship for like basically for as long as I like we were in school together and stuff. And that I feel like it's kind of something that's happened a lot, where that relationships of feeling valid as a man being tied in with the pursuit of like some goal about dating people or achieving this thing, as opposed to it being a natural consequence of like just being around people. It becomes something that's much more in a way that can like, I don't know, just have negative effects in your life beyond that. And so I guess that's one that's not exactly as funny of a story. It's more like, damn, but it's one that I reflect on. Like I now kind of in hindsight understand what that was. And I mean, yeah, I'll probably need to write that down and tell it to people if they can, so they can like try to not do that if they're a young man in school. But yeah, it's just like the kind of a classic story of
I hope a lot of
priorities
young
switching.
men, go above and beyond, do it times 10. Let's get the stats up there on the hegemonic, stats up. No,
Patriarchy maxing.
Yeah.
They got to do it. It's good.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on my channel. This is Noah Samson on popupnoahsamson.com here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Love your show. Big fan.
It's important to note that these two boys didn't kiss each other until the suggestion was made by Tashi. They did it for Tashi. The heteroerotic reality of masculine performance is solidified by their kiss, yeah. But only because Tashi overrides the rules of masculine adherence these boys have participated in with herself. This reminds me of my friend who loves to take two guys home from the club and make them fuck each other for pleasure. Shout out to all the Vancouver guys I've heard about that love situational anal. Anyways, the first Art vs. Peter match happened 13 years earlier. It is an idea conceptualized by Tashi on the basis of who gets my number. The baddie has a mare price, brothers. This is also a match that Peter promised to throw, now being taken seriously by him. This same battle could have taken place with any other woman. It just happens to be Tashi who caught the eye of our two boys here. Meaning, Tashi is manipulating hegemony, yes, but there's a difference to women's relations to hegemony. We'll get to that in a bit. The trophy of this tennis game, and the game of life later on, fuels Peter, causing him to take this match seriously, competing with the ferocity of a teenage boy in a Tyla comment section, while Tashi smiles at Patrick on the stands and frowns at Art. Now, what's Tashi's reason for winning this game? Simple: victory. Tashi wants to win in the bigger picture, in life. Love for Tashi has to be a peer, someone on the same tennis level as her. Remember how we said tennis is a metaphor for life? Her freak is life, and she's asking these two to match it. Backed up by the fact the only time she admitted she was in love was not with the man who she had a whole child with, not with the star tennis player Patrick, but with a woman who she competed with. Tashi is a spectator in the metaphor of hegemony. Just like how women are excluded from men's spaces in the real world, Tashi is forced to spectate, even though she's probably the best tennis player there. The movie then proceeds to flashback 13 years earlier while Peter is winning again. Tashi, however, is now worried and less cheerful than she was 13 years earlier. We find out she ended up with Art, and we can suspect her worries surrounds her choice made 13 years ago. The rest of this movie is Art taking masculine loss after masculine loss. One of these instances included Art interrogating Patrick on whether he had cunnilingus time with Tashi, even though Tashi told Patrick not to brag about it. However, the hegemony does as the hegemony does and compels Art to reach for personal sanity, leading Patrick to send the "I fucked the future love of your life" signal, using Art's signature setup. A metaphor of, I'm beating you at your own game, and in fact, I beat you before you even had a chance. What edged me, however, was the ways relating to hegemony in which the movie used suggestive undertones in order to insinuate confidence and discourage it in line with masculinity. In the last tennis match for Zendaya's heart, we can see the phallic imagery of Patrick eating a banana while he's up on Art. You know, biting a banana is a lot like biting his dick. It's emasculating, I promise. Later on, when the narrative shifts to Art's perspective, the transitionary shot before it begins leads with him being down on the life/tennis scoreboard, which is metaphorical of what we've seen. Art is then seen holding two balls, strolling confidently onto the court while it's his serve. Patrick ends up winning the first battle, the one 13 years earlier, and also ends up dating Tashi. But since Tashi and Art are going to Stanford and Patrick is on the road with the pros, Art gains the opportunity to interact with Tashi way more than Patrick and ends up using it to try to manipulate Tashi. In one of these attempts, he says,
"He's not in love with you."
What makes you think I want someone to be in love with me?
What the fuck? So the ferocity of these two white twinks, trust-fundingly fighting for your hand in marriage, doesn't make you quiver? It turns out she had her own intentions too. Tashi is actually fed up with Patrick losing on the road. The only thing Patrick is worried about, however, is the fact he doesn't have to work a job, which is awesome. I'm not saying it's not, okay? I love my chillers. Unemploy max even. But the clause of winning made in the first tennis match, initially enough to persuade Tashi, isn't enough to keep her, to the surprise of Patrick. You may win a tennis game, but tennis is a relationship you have to maintain. Art understood this and put Tashi in a managing position and married her. But even then, marriage is a relationship, just like tennis, you have to maintain. Tashi even teases Patrick, telling him he should be intimidated by Art because he's smart, attractive, and really good at tennis. Needless to say, they end up breaking up, because this rattles Patrick's confidence in the realms of hegemony. Even though he looks like the Ratatouille guy, his confidence is placed in his innate ability to 1. Seduce women, and 2. Play tennis really well. Zendaya's character, Tashi, tells him, that's your problem. You always think you've won before the game is over. Are we talking about tennis? Patrick, getting how he clicked through the terms and conditions of this relationship before signing up, finally considers his partner's feelings, leading to Tashi and Patrick breaking up. Tragedy also strikes Tashi when she gets injured in her next match. She finds out she'll never be able to play as well as she once had, which sends her into a depression. I mean, Tashi was en route to becoming the next superstar. We even find out 13 years later, the top women's tennis player was the person Tashi beat when Archie and Art first encountered her. We even get a very powerful slow shot I loved of Tashi, coming to terms with the realization that she'll never play tennis at the level she used to anymore. Parallel to the real world, Tashi represents the glass ceiling women find in hegemony. She can't accomplish all she wants in tennis, in life, anymore. Devastated, she settles for a muse, Art. With the position of a manager, Art comes up to Tashi. Tashi accepts, settling with the potential of a future she can't reach, metaphorically losing her legs and using Arts to carry her the rest of the way. I mean, can you blame her? Tashi has stated she grew up poor, had to fight tooth and nail for the accolades she gathered in her career, and to top it off, her dream was taken away by chance, by a freak injury. Metaphorically, she was taken out of the game of life by a force she can't control. The illusion of patriarchy, meaning being Art's wife, however, can switch this all around. So after 13 years of managing Art and marriage, why isn't she satisfied? Because a relationship needs to be maintained. What happens when someone who's obsessed with the best only gets pretty good? Tashi ends up having a kid with Art, and Art ends up being a really, really good tennis player, but never the best, and never for long. Hold your horses, though, there's a bit before we get to the expellius extremitus, before we get to the climax. To recap, since this current match 13 years in the future, Patrick and Tashi broke up. Art ends up winning a lot and losing sometimes, ending up in being good but not good enough, leading to Tashi to lose attraction towards him because what she fell in love with was the promising future of Art's potential. She's seen the limit, isn't satisfied, and is now losing interest. Tashi makes Art join a tournament for a self-esteem boost, and then Patrick ends up signing up for the same one and bumps into Tashi in the lobby on a date, leading to this conversation to happen.
I want you to be my coach.
Patrick asking Tashi to coach him, seeing through the frustration with Art, leading Tashi to say,
What dreams, Patrick? You never had any.
Is that what you and Art are doing? Living the dream?
That is exactly what the fuck we're doing.
Then how come you hate him? He does whatever you want. Except now he's not even pretending to like it.
Art loves family and the sanctity of peace way more than tennis, but Tashi isn't ready to leave tennis behind. Through this interaction, Patrick now senses an in. If he can beat Art, he can break him and take the prize he lost so long ago back then. Stop this spiral of coasting in his car he's been doing and be a real tennis player. Patrick finally understands the relationship, tennis, and the ideation of comfort it brings to Zendaya. It also kind of turns out Zendaya fucked Patrick 2 different times at least while Art's been with her. And Art is super jealous because, how could a woman love a manipulator? Wah. It's interesting how the way everyone perceives winning in tennis, I can see them, but they can't see me. Oh my God. They could see me, but I can't see them. This is better. Defines the way they form their relationships. Art defined it as scoring the most points, Patrick as beating the man in front of him, and Zendaya as a bigger meaning of life. When Art mentions retiring, being satisfied with what he's built, Zendaya calls Patrick in a lapse of vulnerability and ends up fucking him, coming back home and finding Art tucked in bed with her child. The movie ends with Tashi seated in the middle of the match, unflinching, while Art and Peter go back and forth. Who is the better man? back and forth. What is a point, and how do you go about acquiring one? Back and forth. What did the game of tennis bring to them? Back and forth. But however you want to look at it, they both won. Peter got his reward. He had sex with a woman in a relationship he was lusting over. Art got his reward. He became a really good tennis player with the whole family, house, and business to account for. Zendaya won. She got the future she wanted and a match between these two men which invigorated her, leading her to yell out in ecstasy once again, the only other time being when she beat the current women's champion. Who wins? The Challengers isn't meant to have an ending. Its ending comes with the personal conclusion of its viewers. It turns out tennis is a real thing. There's a real world outside the bounds of this movie, which fueled the creation of its plotline. Who wins in the end is a subjective message for the viewer. And in the same way we debate, is Larry Bird or Magic Johnson better? Are Art or Patrick better? Or why the Angel Reese and Caitlin Clarks of the world are only viewed outside of their box score in the media of today. Ask yourself, who wins? Is it the man who secures financial and social status? Or the man who secures personal satisfaction? Both rooting from their own personal desires. Well, this movie wasn't about tennis. The answer will come with each subjective viewer's relationship to life. Thank you so much for watching my video. This has been Tirrrrb of Tirrrrb.